Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 556 for the 16th of June 2019. Richard Saunders here with you once again from the San Francisco Bay Area. The day I arrived was a record heat day, I think, for San Francisco Airport. Coming up on this week's show, a slightly truncated, shorter show than normal, due to my being somewhat busy, preoccupied, I guess you could say, while I'm here in the Bay Area. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoy it. We're going to start with an interview with my old friend Ross Blocher from the Oh No, Ross and Carrie Podcast. Love catching up with Ross from time to time. Now, this time Ross is going to talk to us about something he was involved with last year with the Committee for Inquiry Investigations Group. With Jim Underdown, they went out to show that the world is really round. Yes, well, we know the world is really round. We know it's really a globe, a sphere. But, of course, recently there's been the rise of the Flat Earth movement. Surprisingly enough, I'm still surprised about that. So Jim Underdown, Ross Blocher and a group of skeptics headed out with prominent Flat Earth proponents to run some tests in the field on a lake, the Salton Sea in California, to demonstrate using very interesting scientific tests that the world really is a globe. Did they succeed? And did they succeed in convincing the Flat Earthers that they've been wrong? 3 guesses. The video, which is available on YouTube, I can highly recommend. It's fascinating. It's good fun. It's interesting. And I'll be playing some clips from that video during my interview with Ross Blocher coming up at the top of the show. After that, it's guest reporter Susan Gerbic from Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia. Susan was lucky enough to attend the recent Skepticon here in San Francisco. I just missed out going to that. What a pity. I hope maybe next year I can go to that. And Susan interviews Thomas Westbrook, who runs a YouTube channel called Holy Kool-aid, which I've seen from time to time, where you can see explanations on things like hot and cold reading when it comes to psychics. And in fact, just recently, Thomas on that channel interviewed Susan Gerbic about her busting of a prominent so-called medium. And speaking of cold and hot reading and things like that and psychics, just as an aside, in the last couple of weeks, I, together with Jessica Singer from the Australian Skeptics, who you hear occasionally on the Skeptic Zone, at Skeptics in the Pub, well, we attended a live performance of a so-called psychic or a medium. This is something skeptics must do every now and then. I do it to keep my mind active and engaged in the topic of cold reading and psychic reading and all that sort of stuff, and to see what people are up to now. And without giving anything away, because we're going to prepare an article for publication, it's, well, I will give something away. It's surprising how similar these psychic acts are after all the years I've been going along to see them. There's scarcely any difference between what I saw almost 20 years ago at certain venues and what I saw only a couple of weeks ago. The basic patter for lots of these people, it's almost like they come out of a cookie cutter machine, press a button and get the next medium, is describing somebody vaguely as if they can sort of see them. I'm getting a man, he's not too tall, maybe around 5'5". He's got grey hair, so I think he was quite elderly when he passed. Something around the chest, and who is this man? Dearie, can you do you know what I'm talking about? Can you understand this? What's this about a funny sense of humour he had? Okay, somebody will pick up on something. Oh yes, my uncle. Yeah, he had heart problems. Oh, really? Yes, he's telling me that, and on it goes. And then they'll move to the next person and the next person. And it was quite surprising. Well, not surprising, I suppose. The audience was small, but eventually the psychic came and gave me messages from my late mother. And Anyway, you can read all about that probably in an upcoming issue of The Skeptic, the magazine from Australian skeptics. And talking about that magazine, we're going to round off the show with another item from The Skeptic. This time, it's sort of strangely aligned to the Flat Earthers, where we have a story about conspiracy theories regarding the Earth's magnetic pole and anti-vaxxers. The fact, and it may sort of be made clear in the report, anti-vaxxers are also heavily into conspiracy theories. And some years ago, around 2011, our friend Ken McLeod, who you heard on the Skeptic Zone a few weeks ago talking about chemtrails, wrote a story about how anti-vaxxers were pushing another conspiracy theory to do with the atmosphere. Will the magnetic poles flip? What could that mean for us? Find out at the end of the show. And before we get stuck into the show, a big shout out to somebody I'll be visiting soon, Ben Radford. In a couple of weeks, I'll be flying to Albuquerque, New Mexico, to visit Ben. Can't wait for that. But I have been really enjoying the episodes of Squaring the Strange, the podcast he co-hosts with our friend Celestia Ward and the other co-host Pasquale, who I'd like to meet as well. Just Google Squaring the Strange, but we often run promotions for that anyway. In fact, the episode I was listening to just yesterday involved one of my favorite topics, psychic detectives. And Ben and Celestia go into detail about a certain case, and it's absolutely fascinating. Great podcast, Ben. Great podcast, Celestia and Pasquale. Well done. Squaring the Strange, folks. But now it's time for me to run upstairs and have a peanut butter sandwich, but not just any peanut butter. Oh, this is my own special mixture. Okay. Big jar of peanut butter, any brand really, as long as it's crunchy. As long as it's crunchy. I scoop about half the jar out and put that peanut butter in another jar. Then add a good dose of crushed chilies. Mix that up. A splash of sesame oil. Mix that up. Then, hold on to your hats, a couple of tablespoons of maple syrup. Or maybe 1 tablespoon should do it. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Some sourdough toast. A little bit of butter. Spread that on top. Whew. Well, I drift upstairs. Well, I run upstairs quickly and do that. I hope you enjoy The Skeptic Zone. Joining me now from beautiful downtown Burbank, it's one of the hosts of the podcast Oh No, Ross and Carrie, Ross Blocher. Hello, Ross.
Hello, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, Ross, anytime. Now, the last time I saw you in person was earlier this year, was in Portland, Oregon, where you and Carrie were doing a live performance.
Yes, and you were there with Brian Dunning. It was great to see you.
Yeah, we had a wonderful time, and the audience loved it. And after that, I interviewed you it was very cold, and we jumped into Brian Dunning's car, and that's where I did the interview.
Yeah.
And I understand you've recently been touring Texas.
Yeah, we ended up doing 10 shows on our live tour. We'd promised at least 3, so we met that promise. And we just finished off in Dallas and Austin talking about some fun we had at an exorcism conference.
Ooh. I can't wait. Can't wait. You guys have so much fun. I know it's a lot of hard work, but you guys have so much fun too.
We do. Makes it worth it.
Now, the reason we're having a chat today is that I really enjoyed a video you were recently a part of, and yes, the link will be in this week's show notes, folks, from the CFI Investigation group, filmed in June last year with Jim Underdown and yourself and some skeptics I recognized. You're set off to try to show to a bunch of flat earthers that the world really is round.
Yeah.
And I'll just play the introduction to that video now.
With a growing online community convinced that the Earth is not a sphere, we invited a group of flat earthers to join us as we put the curvature of the Earth to the test. We're on our way to the Salton Sea to not prove but reconfirm that the Earth is a globe and not a disk. This better work.
So off you all set. I believe you got up very early in the morning. Please tell us about the day.
Well, we'd planned for this long in advance, and it's something that kept ballooning in size. Originally, I'd reached out to a small group, a meetup group based out of Santa Monica that was a meeting place for flat earthers, and Carrie and I, for our podcast, we had gone to a couple of their meetings, walked the beach with them, and just talked about some of the conversations we'd had. And during those conversations, it had been brought up that one of the consistent refrains of the flat earth movement is that water cannot hold a curve. And the idea that you can have this long stretch of water and have water sort of bending along with the curvature of the Earth just strikes the flat earthers as improbable, impossible, even laughable. And so we thought, well, what better way to test this than to find a really big lake, so big that you can stand on either side of it, but have enough distance, in this case over 9 miles, between one side and the other, that you have a measurable curvature. And we used the Metabunk curvature calculator to estimate that, at a viewing height of about 4 feet, as I recall, I think it was 9.7 miles across. I could verify this, or I could just work with my memory. I'm going with my memory.
Okay.
An object on the other side of about 35 feet of height would be obscured by the water, that curve that supposedly does not exist.
Right.
So that was the premise, and we were trying to be, I think, very sympathetic to their claims and design a test, as the IIG always tries to do, or I should say the CFI IG, as it's now called, always tries to design a test that both sides can agree to as a fair test. And so we drove out. It's a long drive to the Salton Sea, and we got there the night previous. And along the way, as we were planning for this, it was determined that Mark Sargent could be involved. And for anyone who's not familiar with him, Mark Sargent is kind of the originator of the modern flat earth movement. There were other people talking about it before him, but he released this series of YouTube videos called Flat Earth Clues that really got the movement going in the last 3-4 years. And so he was going to be there, and National Geographic was already working on a piece about him, and so they wanted to get involved with this. And all of a sudden, this became a far more interesting test.
It is amazing to me that someone like Mark Sargent went out with you guys. Again, when I watched the video, I was a little bit gobsmacked by it. And I know there were 2 tests basically on the day. The first one involved a balloon, and I'll just play a little clip of that right now.
The idea is that if the Earth is curved, as scientists tell us, across a span of 9.61 miles, we should be able to predict that an object about 34 feet tall would be completely hidden under the horizon, under the curvature. But if the Earth is flat, you should be able to see it right away. So that's going to give us room to test whether the Earth is curved or flat.
So that was test number 1. That was test number 1, and the balloon rose, and basically you were trying to determine how high it would have to be at a distance of, and I did a little bit of calculations here, roughly 10 miles. We can round it up, which is roughly 16 kilometers. Right.
And it turns out it's hard to do any of this. It's hard to demonstrate the curvature of the Earth to anyone's satisfaction. And so we had hooked up these giant balloons, weather balloons, with and there were no UFO sightings that day. So at least We kept our claims to a minimum here, but we filled them up with helium. So Jim Underdown had gotten a big tank of helium to fill these, and then attached to those there was this structure that had a semi-rigid connection between the two balloons, and it was trailing this bright reflective kind of foil-like material, and that was something that would hopefully be an easily spottable target from the other side because it would catch the light and reflect it back. And so there were many birthing pains in getting this thing up into the air, and we started the test later than desired. We were kind of hoping to do it right as day broke, but by the time it was up, heat was already starting to build up on the lake, and you had a little bit of distortion happening.
Yes.
And so some of the flat earthers were complaining bitterly about that. Many of them came up to me and said, this is the worst possible place to conduct a test. And I think it's kind of funny that they've gone back so many times subsequently, at least 3 to my counting, to this exact same location. But so then we were trying just to establish a visual connection between the two sides, and we're on cell phones talking to each other. And because we were having a hard time spotting the balloon at all, as we were lifting it up in the air and it was tethered to rope, people went up on an embankment so they could see from a higher vantage point. And then we finally made visual contact and at least knew exactly where to point all of our cameras and binoculars. And at that point, then the flat earthers started saying, well, look, see, we're seeing it, and it's near the ground. But they were ignoring the fact that they were up on an embankment, and on the other side, the balloons were up on an embankment. So we were no longer dealing with the numbers at shoreline. So that's where confusion began and continued.
Well, I think it's a very good indication that, and you're absolutely right, and I've come across this myself when I've conducted, for example, $1 million challenges for or helped anyway, for the James Randi Educational Foundation. It is hard to do a good test to satisfy everybody, and ultimately, I guess it's almost impossible to do a good test to satisfy everybody.
Certainly when you have commitments to previously held ideas, that's for sure. But having, right. I had purchased a camera specifically for these tests, the Nikon P900. This is one that is revered amongst flat earthers. There are newer models now, but it's an 83x zoom camera, and it is truly impressive in its zoom. And so there are many videos online where they claim that it can recapture things that have been lost beyond the curve. A boat can go over the horizon and you can pick it back up with this camera, which is absurd on the face of it. But I had bought this and we had it set at 4 feet above the water. And I can say from that perspective that we never saw those balloons or the attached foil material below where one would expect to see them. So as far as I'm concerned, all the results were fully consistent with a round Earth, but those kind of heat waves that were appearing in the footage made for a lot of consternation. And, nature isn't always as clean cut as we'd like it to be.
It did. And folks, again, I'll play a short clip from the video with Mark Sargent bringing up some concerns and excuses.
The results were exactly what I expected. The loss of observation height was due to Fata Morgana, refraction, atmospheric lensing.
I've seen this so many times that when someone is presented with massive evidence right in front of their face, they still find wiggle room to somehow get around and land at their original belief.
So that was interesting and sort of not unexpected he would say things like that. There was a further experiment on a boat,
yes,
where a little inflatable, I think, and a sort of like a flag, a big banner, a board with stripes. And the idea was the further the boat went away, the more of the stripes would start to sink below the horizon, the curvature of the Earth. And I'll let listeners go to YouTube and see that one for themselves. But what really interested me, the whole thing was interesting, but what particularly caught my attention was towards the end, where there was just random thoughts and opinions from some of the flat earthers who were there, and I'll just play a short clip now.
No, they admit they destroyed the technology to go to the moon.
It's a fact that they can't go to the moon anymore.
It's a fact that
we have more technology in our cell phone. We have more technology in our cell phone.
You guys are smarter than all the scientists in the world. That's amazing.
Who would be the powers that be?
It's the bloodlines, dude. Royal bloodlines are in control.
Now, I'm not saying the President of the United States. We're talking probably levels of magnitude above him.
It's population control, dude. Chemtrails. You know about chemtrails? Or you heard about them?
There's so many wacky ideas surrounding flat Earth belief that it's just hard to tell how they ended up in these spots.
Yeah.
So, Ross, hearing those people, it's something that's I've always sort of found to be true, is that if you sort of believe in one big conspiracy, you sort of have to almost believe in many big conspiracies. It's like the anti-vaxxers. A lot of those people believe in chemtrails and global one world governments and things like that.
Yeah, these go together. They come in packs. And what I think one of the underlying assumptions that fuels all of these ideas is that we're all being lied to, and that there's this, shadow government or cabal or, a group of, smoking men that are controlling all of our fates, and thus we're being systematically lied to on so many levels. And when you have that as a premise, there's really nothing you can offer as counter evidence, because it's all faked. It's all lies. It's all people being bought off, and all we can do is just wonder where our checks are.
I wonder where my check is, I can tell you now. Ross, it is a great video on many levels. One, it's fun. It's interesting and fun. Two, it shows that skeptics are willing to go out and test and do things in the field, as opposed to the commonly held belief that skeptics sit at home in their armchairs, smoke a pipe, or do whatever they do and say it's rubbish, I won't believe it. Skeptics are willing to go out there and try something. And it also shows blatantly, clearly, that when you meet these conspiracy theorists with their mindset, that even direct evidence, blindingly simple, direct, easy evidence, is meaningless to them.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to give them credit for also showing up. I think that was a big move on their part. And they showed up in big numbers, and they got very excited about this, and they've gone back since. We had a very fun follow-up where later that same month, we went back at night and we tried some laser experiments, and we had this moment where from one side of the lake, the Salton Sea, you could crouch and the water would obscure and cleanly hide lights on the other side of the Salton Sea. And then when you stood up, you could see those lights. And we did this repeatedly, and there were people amongst the flat earthers there who refused to do that. They refused to even crouch because they were so upset at this really easy demonstration of the Earth's curvature.
Wow.
It was such an open and shut case. But as you see in the video, oftentimes these discussions will quickly break down into bigger talking points about levels above Trump and all these other things.
Yeah. Well, Ross, I wish I was there. Maybe I can do something similar in Australia. That would be a lot of fun. It's a fascinating journey into human psychology apart from anything else. Well, congratulations on the continuing success of Oh No, Ross and Carrie. Please give my personal regards to Carrie next time you see her. And folks, I will link to the Oh No, Ross and Carrie podcast again in this week's show notes. But for now, from around the curvature of the Earth, so I can't see you, but for now, from beautiful downtown Burbank, Ross Blocher, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Hello, listeners of Maximum Fun. I want to tell you about our newest podcast that tells you all about the truth of the flat Earth.
Have you been looking out over the horizon and you've been thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't look round. I've been lied to my whole life.
What is NASA doing with $52 million a day?
Come on. We explode the myths.
Just kidding. We're Oh No, Ross and Carrie, and we investigate extraordinary claims.
That's right. We investigate extraordinary claims firsthand. We go undercover in fringe groups. We get alternative medicine treatments. And we hang out with people who have unusual beliefs, like flat earthers, 9/11 truthers.
We do ghost investigations. We've joined Scientology, and we got baptized in the Mormon Church.
If it goes bump in the night, then so do we. Why don't you check out Ono, Ross, and Carrie at MaximumFun.org?
Hello, everyone. I'm here at Skepticon in San Bruno area of California, and I've run into a friend of mine who's from Texas, is a very popular YouTuber. He has done a wonderful video about the Thomas John saga, if you want to find that on his YouTube site, Holy Kool-aid.
Hey, nice to be here.
So it's great. So this is your first Skepticon. What did you think?
It's been fun. I've really enjoyed it. I knew a few people here from SciCon, yourself included, but it's always good to run into people, see familiar faces, meet new people, connect, rub shoulders, and spread a love of science and skepticism.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your website, your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so my name's Thomas Westbrook. I have a YouTube channel called Holy Kool-aid where I make animated videos talking about science, promoting skepticism and critical thinking. And basically I take a complex topic and I try to break it down in a laser-focused way. So I might take a topic like psychics, whether they're real or raw, or whether there's anything to it or not, and I'll break down how can we know? How can we figure out if this is true? How has it been tested in the past? Has it been debunked in the past? What would it take for them to prove that it's right? And then I go through the different methods that they use, like hot reading, cold reading, and I explain and explore like how these things are done so that people can inoculate themselves against falling prey to a lot of the charlatans. And I also cover the flat earth movement, I cover faith healers, I cover all kinds of different topics. I have a series called The Story of Life, and I explore how did life get here? What do we know? What have we replicated so far in terms of abiogenesis experiments, looking at chemistry and how life can come from non-life. There's so many different topics, but I love science. I want to know how the world works, and I'm just intrinsically extremely curious, and I want to spread that love of science and knowledge and learning and critical thinking.
I would have to tell everybody that I totally agree with that. Could you give us the name of your YouTube channel?
Holy Kool-aid.
And how would you spell that?
HOLYKOOLAID.
Thank you so much, Thomas.
Thank you, Susan.
Méta de choc, méta de choc.
Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Elisabeth Feiti et je suis créatrice du podcast Méta de choc. 2 fois par mois, je vous propose de découvrir un nouvel invité pour explorer l'univers de la métacognition. Pourquoi nous pensons ce que nous pensons? Plusieurs de ces émissions sont sous-titrées en anglais. La dernière en date est même intégralement en anglais, puisque j'y échange avec Jessica Schaab, ancienne gourou du New Age devenue sceptique. Retrouvez-nous sur la chaîne YouTube de Méta de choc, METADECHOC. À bientôt.
Méta de choc, méta de choc.
Hello everyone, I'm Elisabeth Feiti, the creator of the French-speaking Méta de choc podcast. Twice a month, I host a new guest to explore the field of metacognition, why we think the way we think. Some shows are subtitled in English, and actually the latest one is all in English. An exclusive conversation with Jessica Schaab, an ex-New Age guru who turned skeptic. Join us on the Méta de choc YouTube channel, METADECHOC. À bientôt.
Méta de choc, méta de choc.
From the Skeptic Magazine, volume number 31, number 1, from 2011, Poles Apart. Ken McLeod takes a break from the AVN, sort of, to look at some silly science. Well, you can stop worrying about water fluoridization and alien invasions and vaccines and orgone radiation from cell phone towers or any of the other disasters that are slowly creeping up on us to wipe out humanity. No, It's not because these threats don't exist, it's because there is a humanity-destroying disaster unfolding right before our eyes, and we'll all be dead before any of them can hurt anybody. Let me explain. The good folk at the Australian Vaccination Network, and of course now they're called the Australian Vaccination Risks Network, formerly the Australian Vaccination Skeptics Network, and before then, the Australian Vaccination Network. The good folk at the Australian Vaccination Network have alerted us to the unfolding disaster that has been revealed by mass bird deaths and the change of an airport's runway's designation at Tampa, Florida. In a long email sent on January the 14th, 2011, from one of the AVN's leading lights, quote, "Our fresh ideas," end quote, she reveals that it all begins on a runway in Tampa, where the airport officials recently closed that runway in order to change the numeric designators painted there. Why are those numeric designators being changed? Because the Earth's magnetic poles are shifting, and the numbers previously painted on the runway no longer match up with the magnetic measurements of sensitive airplane instruments. Wow! Who could have guessed that the Earth's magnetic poles are shifting? Who could have guessed that runway designations have to be changed because of that? Scary stuff, but it gets worse. The Earth's magnetic field flips, or reverses polarity, every few thousand years. This is called geomagnetic reversal. In between these flips, the magnetic field can become quite weak and chaotic, causing turbulence in the field, which can effectively cause weaker gaps in the magnetosphere. These magnetic gaps or weaknesses can allow outside influences that normally would not penetrate the magnetosphere to reach deep into that magnetosphere, theoretically all the way down to where birds fly at very low altitude. The weakening Earth magnetosphere was allowing poisonous space clouds to enter deep into the Earth's atmosphere, where it is coming into contact with birds. These space clouds are called noctilucent clouds, which exist at very high altitudes, roughly 50 miles, and accumulate space dust from micrometeorites and other sources. These deadly space clouds are reaching into the lower atmosphere and killing these birds in flight. What exactly would be found in these deadly space clouds that might be killing the birds? She asks, and offers the following possibilities. Point. These clouds might be moving along with gaps in the magnetosphere that would invite deadly radiation to fry the birds in flight. Point. The deadly space clouds could have frozen the birds in flight with blasts of extremely cold air. Point. The most likely explanation is that the birds were killed in flight by changes to the composition of the air they were breathing. And as it turns out, noctilucent clouds are largely made up of a poisonous gas known as hydrogen cyanide. Point. Secret weapon testing and the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, HAARP, could be altering the magnetosphere in ways that are contributing to the invasion of our lower atmosphere with these noctilucent clouds composed of hydrogen cyanide. So there you have it. The mass bird deaths are caused by radiation or super cold air or poisonous gases brought to the lower atmosphere by a weakened magnetosphere caused by secret government weapon projects, and we're all doomed. And government is spelled Gummint. She goes on to say, could humans be next? The really concerning part about this is the sudden realization that if these poisoning clouds of hydrogen cyanide could reach into our lower atmosphere, they could also, theoretically, reach ground level. That's where humans live, of course, and if such a poisonous cloud reached down into a major city such as New York, it would cause the mass instantaneous death of potentially millions of people. There's just a few problems with this scenario, which should be bleeding obvious to anyone with a high school science education, and certainly were to this crusty old navigator. Firstly, the movement of the Earth's magnetic poles is a well-understood phenomenon and has been known by navigators as long as we've used compasses. The difference between bearings to true north, the Earth's rotational axis or North Pole, and the North Magnetic Pole is known as magnetic variation. This changes at a known rate as the magnetic poles move due to the fluid nature of the Earth's core. The magnetic variation at Tampa, Florida is 5 degrees 15 minutes west, currently changing by 0 minutes 5 degrees west a year. Tampa has undergone a change of magnetic variation of 3 degrees 9 minutes in the last 100 years. Runways are designated by the first two numerals of their magnetic bearing around to the nearest 10 degrees. So Tampa's runway 18L got its designation from its magnetic bearing at the time it was built of 183 degrees. Many years later, the magnetic bearing of the runway has changed to 186 degrees, so it has been designated runway 19L. The L designation means the left of two parallel runways. So there is nothing unusual in a change of a runway designation, but it is rare enough to excite the conspiracy theorists. Nothing to worry about here, folks. Yes, the Earth's magnetic poles do undergo geomagnetic reversal, and the reversals are recorded in the magnetism of ancient rocks. Neither the cause nor the predictability are well understood, the last such reversal occurring 780,000 years ago, and the next one is probably tens if not hundreds of thousands of years away. The Earth's magnetic field strength is about its historical average. Nothing to worry about here, folks. Noctilucent clouds, from the Latin for night shining, are made of crystals of water ice. They are not made of space dust or hydrogen cyanide, and are not being lowered to the altitude birds fly at, or lowered to anywhere. Nor are they frying birds with radiation or freezing them. Nothing to worry about here, folks. Nor are secret weapon testing and high-frequency active auroral research program, HAARP, quote, altering the magnetosphere, end quote. Whatever changes are happening are entirely natural and normal. The current theory of the cause of mass bird deaths centers on flocks of birds being panicked by New York's fireworks. As the U.S. Geological Survey's National Wildlife Health Center pointed out, quote, there is nothing apocalyptic or anything that is necessarily out of the ordinary for what we would see in any given week. So get back to worrying about something else. There's nothing to worry about here except the mindset of the people who circulate this rubbish. And if you turn to the article yourself by visiting www.skeptics.com.au and going to the section on the Skeptic magazine, there's some nice diagrams accompanying this article, including a little diagram showing the movement of the North Magnetic Pole. So that was Poles Apart by Ken McLeod, published in the Skeptic magazine, volume 31, number 1, and you can find that on page 42.
Dr. Harriet Hall, MD, known to thousands as the Skepdoc, a retired family physician and former Air Force flight surgeon. She writes about medicine, so-called complementary and alternative medicine, science, quackery, and critical thinking. Harriet now has a free course, a series of 10 video lectures on science-based medicine and alternative medicine. The videos and an accompanying course guide can be found by following the link at skepdoc.info or by visiting web.randy.org/educational-modules.skepdoc. HTML. Topics covered in the series are science-based medicine versus evidence-based medicine, what is CAM, chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy and herbal medicine, energy medicine, miscellaneous alternatives, pitfalls in research, and science-based medicine in the media and politics. Harriet covers each topic in a matter-of-fact, no-nonsense way that's sure to educate and entertain. Skepdoc.info.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. In the coming week, I hope to catch up with my dear friend Dr. Eugenie Scott. In fact, I think we're going to a science exhibition or outing or something in Berkeley in one of the parks there. Jeannie's been giving me some hints about that, so that should be interesting. Always a pleasure to catch up with Dr. Eugenie Scott. You might remember she's a great beekeeper. I think there's something to do with insects coming up. We'll see. And don't forget, if you're in Australia, if you're in Sydney, coming up on the 22nd of June, so not long away. So this coming Saturday night, Maynard's Love Shack number 3 with special guest Lance Leopard plus DJ TC. Now this is at the Red Bar in Glebe at the end of Glebe Point Road near the Broadway, and a great chance for you to see Maynard in action. And what he loves doing best, I think, being a DJ. Also coming up on the 2nd of July at the same location, Maynard presents Flash Gordon with special guest Lance Leopard. You can see details about both those events and buy your tickets by visiting maynard.com.au. Thank you to all those people who contribute to the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal at skepticzone.tv. In fact, the microphone I'm using at the moment is thanks to the generosity of Skeptic Zone listeners. And if you feel so inclined, you can contribute too, if you haven't done so already. Why not chip in? You can chip in for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, 10 months, 6 years, whatever you want to do. And every cent goes to help keep the Skeptic Zone on the internet. And I know a lot of people from feedback like listening to the show, and I suppose a lot of people like listening to lots of podcasts this way, simply driving around in the car. So to those people who are driving right now listening to my voice, a big hello, and remember, a stop sign means stop. Little driving tip for you there. But for this week, from the San Francisco Bay Area, this is Richard Saunders signing off. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello to those people who listen on after the music, the afterthoughts people. And yes, I have brought with me a variety of 10-sided die here to California. And I think, in fact, some of them I use originally came from California. Anyway, I've got a nice transparent yellow one right here. And for those people new to this, every now and then I'll roll a 10-sided die at the end of the show 3 times. And it's a chance for you to use your magical, predicting, psychic, looking into the future, professorial powers. Professorial? Prophetic? If you are a professor, you'd have prophetic professorial power. Anyway, and to see if you can use those powers, whatever they are, to come up with the same number that will appear on the die when I roll it. So here we go. Concentrate now. It's going to be a number from 1 to 10, so 1 all the way to 10. First roll coming up, number 5. I always write these down. Let's see now. 5. Okay. All those people who got 5, well done. Second number coming up. To get all 3, by the way, is you have 1 chance in 1,000. Second roll coming up. Number 1. Number 1. And last roll coming up. Here we go. Guess away or predict away. Number 6. 5, 1, and 6. How did you go?